Brand spanking new Minnesota Fighting Vikings head coach Kevin O'Connell met with the local media jackals down in Florida at the NFL owners meetings, talked about some things going on with the offensive line and free agency as well as on defense. So let's dive on in. Most of these are from Chad Graff, The Athletic, as well as Ben Gessling, Star Tribune. Chad Graff, go. One view of the Vikings offseason is that the rooster hasn't changed much because they're relying on Kevin O'Connell to elevate it and bring them from 8 wins to the playoffs. O'Connell, I don't really look at it like that, to be honest with you. Now, of course, that's what a humble, modest leader is going to say, but that's exactly how this offseason has been scripted, where they kept the band together. They kept Kirk Cousins. They kept Harrison Smith. They kept Adam Thielen. They kept Danielle Hunter, and they added a couple of pieces. So obviously, they're thinking, hey, this is a talented roster. We can really rebuild here with the existing talent. And last season, when they went 8-9, that was more on coaching and leadership. And frankly, I think they're right, because they had every opportunity to blow this thing up. They could have traded Cousins. They could have cut a bunch of these contracts. But no, they're like, we're going to run it back in 2022. Here's what Kevin O'Connell said when asked about the lack of changes from a Vikings roster that missed the playoffs the last 2 years. Although sometimes things may not jump out as changing the rooster, we've made some additions that I think will have a big-time impact. I think he's obviously talking about Zadarius Smith coming in, especially since they're changing the defense, at Donatell's scheme, experience with Mike Pettin as well as Mike Smith. So, yeah, I think that Zadarius Smith is just going to be a monster. Even though Vikings were second in the league last year in terms of sacks, Zadarius and Danielle fully healthy and opposite sides of each other. Just come on, man. Come on. Continues. KOC said there will be an open competition at right guard for the Vikings. New signee Jesse Davis may be the front runner, but he's not being handed the job. Now, the fact that Jesse Davis got a pretty sizable chunk of a signing bonus, which means that is fully guaranteed, I think that does give him the upper hand at this point, because, I mean, generally, you're not going to be paying $3 million salaries for a backup, even though I think that could be Jesse Davis's floor. At minimum, he can be a utility backup that can back up all 4 spots except for center. And Davis at right tackle was garbage. That's what sticks out in the minds of Vikings fans, is certainly Dolphins fans. But Jesse Davis at right guard, his first couple seasons in Miami, pretty damn good. But yeah, I still think that Wyatt Davis should be in the mix. I still think that rookies TBD should be in the mix. And I like that. I hope that this is true. I hope that this is a truly open competition, as opposed to, hey, here is your starter, we're not going to move him, like the previous regime did with Dakota Dozier and Pat Elflein and Oli Udoh, etc. Kevin O'Connell continues. Chad Graff. Doesn't sound like Irv Smith Jr. will do too much on the field this spring as he works his way back from a season-ending meniscus injury. KOC, we're going to be smart with Irv. There's no reason why he can't hit the ground running from a mental perspective this spring. So, yeah, Irv, deep in the playbook during the offseason workouts. I'm sure that he'll do that. But, I mean, meniscuses can be kind of tricky. They certainly can be. Everyone is going to be different as well. And hopefully Irv can rise up and be that tight end one in this offense, because the Vikings, like Ronklin, go to the Jets. And Irv, I mean, year 3, this needs to be it. This needs to be the bust out. Or year 4, this needs to be the bust out, man. He really does need to get after it in this season in this offense. Kevin O'Connell on determining when to go for it, for 2 or on 4th down. The analytics and the data will drive a lot of that, but then the in-game specifics of that day, whether who's the quarterback on the other side, how we have played offensively, how our defense is playing. So that is refreshing. And the Vikings do have a game management coordinator, which is always kind of nice. And I do think that Kevin O'Connell and the staff will bring a more modern, more game theory optimal GTO, baby, perspective to these game situations, as opposed to, I don't know, go for it. Kevin O'Connell says he isn't worried about Danielle Hunter drooping into coverage occasionally in a 3-4 base defense. With his length, his athletic ability, it's almost as much taking up space on the second level of the defense as it is matching people in coverage. And this has been the big concern. Like, well, how can Danielle Hunter play drop into coverage, blah, blah. How come no one ever talks like, hey, what about Khalil Mack dropping into coverage? Hey, what about TJ Watt dropping into coverage? Because that is such a small fraction of what they're asked to do. Yes, they will be dropping into coverage occasionally, mainly as a feint and a bluff, whereas the offense is so enamored with Danielle Hunter, and then all of a sudden he drops into coverage, and then you have other guys coming in through different gaps, or you got his own blitz on, etc. So it is such a small, minute part of what Danielle Hunter is going to be asked to do in this defense. Plus, he could still be a hand-in-the-dirt guy. He could still play that 5-tech, so I ain't worried about 99 at all. We got 99 problems, Danielle ain't one. Kevin O'Connell's optimistic take on the Vikings O-line. There's plenty of coaches in this room right now who are talking about 2 or 3 or 4 spots on the offensive line coming together, while the Vikings have one job open at right guard. So that's kind of saying that Garrett Bradbury is going to be your starting center, which I don't know. Maybe there is hope, because the Rams had an undersized center in Brian Allen, and maybe the Vikings can do Vikings under Kevin O'Connell, and the Vikings with Chris Cooper, and the Vikings with Wes Phillips, who has an offensive line background as well. Maybe they can protect him better than the previous regime did, where it just seemed like Bradbury was constantly in one-on-one spots against oversized defensive tackles and was overpowered. And you like the intangibles. He's good at calling protections. He's good when out in space. He's good as a run blocker. So maybe. And then finally, Gessling had a nice rundown here. One takeaway from Kevin O'Connell's media session at the NFL meetings: he's really excited about Danielle Hunter's Irv Smith combo, how the Vikings can move them around to create favorable matchups. That's why we got Mike Pettin, Mike Smith, and Chris Rumpf. These guys have been in places where we don't have to just always line up with our hand in the ground at the D-end spots, rushing the passer on a straight line. That's where scheme comes into play. We can move these guys. They're movable pieces, both Danielle and Za'Darius. And yeah, I'm pretty fired up about that, where offenses aren't going to know where this guy is going to be. With Zimmer, the defense, it was solid for a couple of years, but then I think teams started catching up to him. And even though the Vikings had some amazing talents, you always knew where they were going to line up. Now imagine if you don't know where 99 is going to be. Now imagine where you don't know where Za'Darius is going to be. I love it. And then O'Connell added there might be some weeks where he turns the offense over to coordinator Wes Phillips, and I'll be the defensive coach that week. That's the good part about being a head coach now. You can be in different rooms when you want, and nobody can say anything to you. So yeah, Kevin O'Connell said that he's going to call the plays, but at times maybe he will turn it over to Wes Phillips, who is a rising name. I think eventually he will become a head coach. But I like that he already said that, hey, I'm going to be the head coach of the entire team, what he's inferring there, which we haven't always had that. And that can be a problem, whether you're offensive head coach or a defensive head coach. If you get too bogged down on one side of the ball, I mean, that takes away, because you're supposed to be the leader of the entire team. And also that can have some division inside the locker room. It's like, hey, he's the head coach, except he never talks to us because he's always working with the other side of the ball. And it can work both ways. So I'm glad that Kevin O'Connell is, as an overseer. Good times, man. But that's it. Rather illuminating. Kevin O'Connell talking at the NFL owners meeting. Let us know your thoughts on our thoughts, on his thoughts in the comment section below. Subscribe for daily Vikings takes. Want to support the work, put a little something in the Venmo. But until next time, Skol, production value.